Your behavior score is at an unacceptable level. If improvement is not demonstrated within 30 days, your home ownership rights will be terminated. Michael Carter read the envelope twice. Behavior score. What behavior? He'd lived in Riverside Meadows for 6 years. He attended HOA meetings. He paid his dues. He lived a quiet, normal family life. But now, he'd been declared non-compliant by a system he didn't know existed. His score, 32, required 75. That same day, 13 of his neighbors received the same letter, all confused, all frightened, and all asking the same question: who's watching us? The answer was in the smart doorbells mounted at their front doors. HOA President Richard Drummond had distributed them for free 8 months ago. For security, he'd said. But the doorbells weren't just recording. Artificial intelligence was analyzing every family: who left when, who they met with, how often they had visitors, where they parked their car, what time they came home at night, which days they took out the trash. And all of this was being converted into a score. 340 people were being graded without knowing it, every day, every hour, and those with low scores were being evicted because Riverside Meadows was no longer a neighborhood. It was an experiment, and Richard Drummond was the lead researcher. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, please consider subscribing to discover more unsolved cases. Portland, Oregon, 2024. Riverside Meadows was known as a perfect neighborhood: gated community, security guards, manicured lawns, clean streets, upper-middle-class families. Everyone knew each other. Everyone followed the rules. Everyone was happy. At least that's how it appeared. That morning, Michael Carter showed the envelope to his wife Jennifer. "What does this mean?" he asked. Jennifer read it. Once, twice. She didn't understand. Behavior score. "We haven't broken any rules." Michael shook his head. "That's what I thought too. But look, it's official documentation. HOA seal. Richard Drummond's signature." That afternoon, Michael went door to door. He asked his neighbors and learned that 13 other families had received the same letter, all with the same phrase: "Your behavior score is unacceptable," all with the same threat: improvement within 30 days or eviction. The families gathered in a garage across the street. 14 families, 38 people total. Everyone was confused. One woman asked, "What did I do? I just work and come home. I don't bother anyone." A man added, "I've never missed a dues payment. I've attended every meeting. Why is my score low?" Michael said, "We're all asking the same question, but the real question is, who's scoring us, and based on what?" Another neighbor, an elderly man, spoke up. 8 months ago, Richard Drummond came to my door. He was distributing free smart doorbells for neighborhood security, he said. To deter burglars, he said. I accepted. We all accepted. It was free, and it made sense. But now I'm wondering, could this have something to do with those doorbells? The group fell silent. Then a woman said, "My doorbell records when it detects motion. Every time I open the door, video footage uploads to the cloud. But I thought it was just for security." Michael stood up. "Maybe it's not just for security. Maybe it's to watch us." The next day, Michael hired a lawyer. The lawyer wrote to the HOA, "We request the legal basis for the behavior score system and its calculation method." The response came 3 days later. Brief and definitive. Section 14.3 of the Riverside Meadows HOA Charter grants the board authority to take necessary measures to maintain neighborhood harmony. The behavior score system is implemented under this authority. Details are confidential by board decision. The lawyer told Michael, "Technically legal. The HOA charter is very broad, and you signed it when you moved in. But we need to learn how the behavior score system works, because if it's arbitrary, we can challenge it in court. But how would they find out? The system was secret. Richard Drummond wasn't providing information, and the 30-day clock was ticking. Every day, the 14 families grew more anxious. Some tried to change their behavior. They started waking up early every morning. They mowed their lawns more frequently. They stopped having guests. They went to bed early. But they didn't know the system wasn't just watching these things. It was watching much more. Meanwhile, Michael's wife Jennifer researched online, searching for HOA abuse, surveillance, doorbell camera, and she found an article. Title: Private Investigator David Harrington investigates unsolved cases. The article said David focused on technology-based crimes. Jennifer showed it to Michael. Maybe he can help. Michael hesitated. But is this a crime? Maybe it's just an overly controlling HOA president. Jennifer replied, if they're watching us without permission, isn't that a crime? Michael called David Harrington. David listened. For a long time. 14 families, mysterious scores, smart doorbells, a 30-day ultimatum. David took notes. Then asked, can I examine one of these doorbells? Michael agreed. The next day, David came to Riverside Meadows. He examined the doorbell at Michael's house. Brand, Secure Home Pro. Model, SH2400. Manufacturer, SmartGuard Technologies. David called in Sam Reeves. Sam was a forensic technology expert, particularly skilled at discovering hidden functions in digital devices. Sam removed the doorbell, took it to her workstation, analyzed it. For the first 30 minutes, it seemed like a normal smart doorbell. Camera, motion sensor, microphone, Wi-Fi connection, cloud storage, standard. But when Sam went deeper, she found something, a hidden module in the firmware. Name, BehaviorTrack v2.7. Sam examined the module's code and froze. This module wasn't just recording motion. It was using artificial intelligence to analyze every door opening, every visitor, every vehicle movement, every trash disposal, every late-night return, and converting these into a score. Sam reported to David, this doorbell is a surveillance device. It has an AI module called BehaviorTrack. It analyzes every movement and calculates a compliance score. For example, if you leave and return at the same time every day, your score increases. If you come and go at irregular hours, your score decreases. If you have frequent visitors, your score decreases. If you return late at night, your score decreases. The system creates a normal behavior model and flags everyone who doesn't conform to it. David asked, where does this data go? Sam looked at the screen. To a central server. IP address belongs to Richard Drummond's house. David called in Elena Cortez. Elena was an investigative journalist, expert at researching people and uncovering backgrounds. Elena's task: research Richard Drummond. Who is this man? Why is he doing this? And has he done it before? Elena researched for 5 days. Richard Drummond, 58 years old, retired software engineer, worked in Silicon Valley for 25 years. Company, Tech Vision Systems. Position, senior AI developer. Specialty, behavioral prediction algorithms. He'd retired 12 years ago and moved to Riverside Meadows. 3 years later, elected HOA president. And since then, he'd been improving the neighborhood. But Elena dug deeper. She spoke with Richard's former colleagues. One, anonymously, told her, Richard was known at the company as having a God complex. He was obsessed with controlling people. He developed a project, a system that monitored employees' movements within the office. Who went to the bathroom when, who took breaks when, who talked to whom. Then he used this data to calculate an efficiency score. Management saw the prototype and rejected it. This isn't ethical, they said. Richard got very angry. He said, people think they're free, but they're actually creating chaos. The system brings order. I'm just providing order. A year later, he retired, but I'm certain he didn't abandon that idea. With this information, David decided to confront Richard Drummond. He went to the HOA office. Richard was there. At his desk, 3 monitors displayed different doorbell feeds. Live. David saw On one monitor, a man was taking out trash. On another, a woman was getting into her car. On the third, a child was riding a bicycle. Richard noticed David. He smiled. "Mr. Harrington, isn't it? The Carter family hired you, I assume." David got straight to the point. "These doorbells aren't just for security. You're scoring people. Without permission, using a secret algorithm." Richard's smile widened. "Not without permission. Everyone signed the HOA Charter. Section 14.3 gives me this authority." David responded, "But nobody knew there was a behavior score system. You're conducting secret surveillance." Richard stood up. He looked at the monitors. "Mr. Harrington, don't you see how the neighborhood has changed? 8 months ago, this place was chaotic. People were coming home at 2 a.m. Cars were parked on the streets. Trash was put out on the wrong days. Music was playing. Lawlessness, disorder, chaos." He paused, then continued, "But look now, everything is orderly. Everyone follows the rules. The neighborhood is peaceful, safe, clean, because people don't follow rules when they know about them, but they do when they feel they're being watched." David stared. In a cold tone, he asked, "So you're controlling people through fear?" Richard corrected, "I'm not frightening them, I'm guiding them. The system just collects data, I interpret it, and those with low scores aren't suitable for the neighborhood." Before David left, he asked one more thing. "What happens when you evict the 14 families?" Richard shrugged. "New ones will replace them, and they'll already know about the system. They'll be more compliant, because the doorbells won't be secret anymore. I tell new residents openly, this is a monitored neighborhood. Your behavior will be scored. If you comply, you'll be happy." David couldn't believe it. "And people accept this?" Richard smiled. "Oh yes, because I promise security, and people will give up anything for security, even freedom." When David left the office, he called Sam. "Can you access the server at Drummond's house?" Sam hesitated. "Technically illegal, but if I use social engineering, maybe." 2 days later, Sam found a method. She infiltrated Richard Drummond's Wi-Fi network. Password, Riverside Secure 2024. Sam found it using brute force. She accessed the server and found 8 months of data, 127 homes, 340 residents, detailed files for each, when they opened their doors, who they met with, how often they had visitors, where they parked their cars, what time they took out trash, when they returned at night, what they did on weekends, when they went on vacation, and a score for every data point. Total score, 0-100 range. Sam analyzed the scoring system. The algorithm worked like this. Morning exit between 6 to 8 a.m., plus 2 points. Return after 11 p.m., minus 3 points. More than 3 visitors per week, minus 5 points. Parking car outside garage, minus 2 points. Taking out trash on wrong day, minus 4 points. Vacation longer than 2 weeks, minus 6 points. Lack of neighborhood commitment. Weekend house party, minus 10 points. Noise risk. Irregular work hours, minus 5 points. Suspicious activity, and more. A total of 47 different criteria. Every movement was scored, and those scoring below 75 were marked as risk. David went to the police with this information, but the police chief said it was a complicated situation. Technically, the HOA Charter allows these kinds of measures, and Drummond isn't entering people's homes. He's just watching from outside. This is a legal gray area. David asked, "But isn't it secret surveillance?" The chief replied, "If residents accepted the doorbell and connected it to Wi-Fi, technically they've given permission. Drummond is smart. He's exploited legal loopholes." David asked angrily, "So what can we do?" The chief thought, "If you can prove unauthorized data collection, maybe the cybercrime division could get involved. But this is complicated. You need a good lawyer." Meanwhile, Elena was researching a different angle. She investigated SmartGuard Technologies. Who's the company? Who owns it? Where is it registered? And what she found was shocking. SmartGuard Technologies was a shell company owned by Richard Drummond, meaning he'd manufactured the doorbells himself and installed his own devices in his own neighborhood as an experiment. When Elena dug deeper, she learned more. In the past 6 months, Drummond had sold the same doorbells to 12 different HOAs, a total of 340 new homes, 900 plus new residents, all connected to the same system, all being scored, and Drummond was planning to franchise this model under the name Behavioral Community Management System. Slogan: Safer Neighborhoods, More Harmonious Neighbors. David gathered the 14 families with this information. Richard Drummond is using you as an experiment. You're guinea pigs for a product's beta test, and if it succeeds here, this system will spread to hundreds of neighborhoods. The families were shocked. One man asked, "So what can we do?" David answered, "You have 2 options. First, fight legally. This is long, expensive, and victory isn't guaranteed. Second, go public. Get media attention. Create pressure." The families chose the second option. Elena prepared a documentary video. Title: The Surveillance Suburb: How One HOA President Turned 340 People into Lab Rats. The video showed footage from the doorbells, from the server Sam accessed, showed Richard Drummond's monitors, explained the scoring algorithm, told the stories of the 14 families, and most importantly, revealed that Drummond was trying to sell the system to 12 other neighborhoods. Elena released the video on social media. Within 24 hours, 2 million views. National news channels got interested. Journalists started flooding into Riverside Meadows. Richard Drummond couldn't leave his house. 3 days later, the FBI got involved. Cybercrime unit. Charges: unauthorized data collection, privacy violations, violations of electronic surveillance laws. They raided Drummond's house, seized his servers, took 8 months of data, and arrested Drummond. During interrogation, Drummond showed no remorse. "I didn't commit a crime, I just provided order. People weren't following rules. During, I made them compliant, and the system worked. The neighborhood was safer, cleaner, happier." The FBI agent asked, "You monitored people without permission. That's a crime." Drummond replied, "They gave permission. They accepted the doorbells. They connected them to Wi-Fi. I just provided the tool. They used it." Agent: "But you didn't tell them they were being monitored." Drummond: "They didn't need to know. If they knew, their behavior would change, and the experiment would be invalid." The trial process lasted 4 months. Richard Drummond was tried on 14 charges. Result: found guilty on 8. Sentence: 6 years in prison, plus $2 million in compensation, to be distributed among 340 residents. But the real punishment was the loss of reputation. Drummond was called the suburban dictator in national media. His photo became a symbol of dystopian control systems, and smart guard technologies went bankrupt. The 14 families stayed in their homes. The HOA elected a new president. First decision: remove all smart doorbells. 127 homes removed their doorbells. They went back to old models, or chose to live without doorbells. Riverside Meadows became a normal neighborhood again. People started coming home whenever they wanted, started having guests. Lawns sometimes went 2 weeks without mowing, and nobody was scored. Freedom returned, but at a cost. Trust was lost. Neighbors looked at each other wondering, was he watching me too? David closed the case file, but one question remained in his mind. Richard Drummond went to prison, but the idea was still out there, and 6 months later, he learned that idea was spreading. 1 year later, Elena prepared a report. Title: Behavioral Scoring Goes Mainstream. Content: after Drummond's arrest, 27 different tech companies developed similar systems. The names were different: Community Safe Score, Neighbor Watch AI, Harmony Track, Behavioral Assurance System, but their functions were the same: monitor residents, analyze behaviors, score them, and flag those with low scores. But this time, the companies were smarter. They didn't keep the system secret. They presented it openly. They marketed it as AI-supported compliance tracking for safer neighborhoods, and HOAs bought it because the legal loopholes still existed. HOA charters still granted broad authority, and residents accepted it because security was promised. And people were willing to give up anything for security, even freedom. When David read Elena's report, he was saddened. We stopped Drummond, but we couldn't stop the system. Elena replied, because the system wasn't one person's idea. The system was an answer to a fear. People feel insecure, and for security, they're willing to accept being controlled. David asked, so what can we do? Elena was silent, then said, I don't know, but I know one thing. Once they start, these kinds of systems don't stop, because they always promise more security, and people always want more security. 2 years later, David saw a news story. Riverside Meadows was installing a new system. Name, Safe Neighbor 3.0. Description, AI-powered neighbor security platform. Movement analysis, behavior prediction, risk assessment, and the most interesting part, the residents had requested it themselves, because for 2 years they'd lived unwatched, and 3 burglary incidents had occurred. Now, they wanted security, and for security, they were agreeing to be watched again. Michael Carter was at that meeting. He voted. He said no, but the vote came in 89 yes, 38 no. The system would be installed. When Michael got home, he told his wife, 2 years ago we escaped this system. Now we're bringing it back, ourselves, voluntarily. Jennifer asked, why? Michael answered, because people forget. Pain is quickly forgotten, but fear is permanent, and fear convinces people to submit to control. Perhaps that was the greatest lesson. Freedom requires struggle, but people don't want to struggle. Instead, they want security, and security always demands a price, freedom, and most people are willing to pay that price. In his cell, Richard Drummond watched a news report on television. 27 new neighborhoods installing behavioral assurance systems. He smiled. He hadn't lost. He just started too early. But the idea had won. The idea always won. Because the idea used fear, and fear was always humanity's strongest motivation. And so, for the first time in history, people were turning their own neighborhoods into prisons, voluntarily, happily, because prison was safe, and security was more important than anything, wasn't it?